So welcome everyone. We're live here with the one and only Dr. Anthony T Browder. And he's going to be in conversation with the Black Secret, myself, and of course, the one and only Black History man, Robin Walker. And we have a special guest with us as well, Paul Obinna, who's an educator, spiritual practitioner, and also the architect of the history scroll as well. So our principal guest, Dr. Anthony T Browder, is an author, publisher, cultural historian, an artist, an educational consultant, a graduate in the fine arts. He's also the founder and director of many institutions as well as being the first and we believe only Black sort of like director of a archaeological dig in Egypt, and is the founder and director of the ASA Restoration Project, which has excavated and done restoration work to the tombs of Krakamun and another tomb from the 25th dynasty in Luxor. So, welcome, Anthony T Browder.
Thank you, brother. It's a pleasure to be with you and my other two brothers. And one correction on your introduction, I do not have a PhD.
Oh.
I'm a lover of history and culture, and that's good enough for me.
Well, you could have fooled me because you know a lot more than most PhDs.
I work hard and I love what I do. So that speaks for me.
Yes, yes. You're a publisher of many books, some of them going back to the early 90s. I remember you originally came up with the Browder Files and then contributions to Nile Valley Civilizations, two masterpieces. I believe you're working on a follow-up to the Browder Files as well, which is going to feature your background and biography as well. Is there anything that you'd like to, for those people who have missed the boat and aren't aware of who Anthony T Browder is, would you like to tell us a little bit about your background and your history and what you would like the audience to know about you?
Sure. Well, thank you for this opportunity. I published my first book in 1989. I've authored or co-authored 15 books, and I'm from Chicago, grew up in Chicago, was born in 1951. Chicago was in 1951 and still is in 2025 the most segregated city in the United States of America, which meant that I grew up in a Black community. I went to a school with Black teachers, Black students, and those teachers made sure that I learned the basics of education. I learned how to read, how to write, how to reason. I graduated from Howard University, a premier HBCU, African American institution. But it wasn't until after I graduated from college in 1977 that my real education began. 1977 was when I met Ivan Van Sertima, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, who had just published his book, They Came Before Columbus, The African Presence in America. And it was during that lecture that Dr. Van Sertima brought to my attention that the ancient Egyptians, Kemites, were Black people, were African. I was blown away because I've always been a lover of history, and nowhere in my formal education did anyone ever tell me that the ancient Egyptians were Black. That's when I realized that I had been miseducated. And so I assumed personal responsibility for re-educating myself. And in the process of re-educating myself, traveling, reading, lecturing, writing, researching, I made it a point to share my information with those with the greatest need to know, and that is African people. I also have been self-employed for 46 years, which means that I've had the benefit of not working for or with racist white people or ignorant Negroes. So working for myself has taught me the value of reciprocity. I get out of my work what I put into it. I determine my own hours, and the money that I generate I put back into my business so that I can travel, so that I could buy books, so I could do what I love to do. So that's been my journey, and I'm at the final quarter of my life, right? And I'm at the point now where my best books are ahead of me. I've got work that I want to produce, and the work that I produce is primarily for my daughter and my grandson. I've had the benefit of being responsible for my daughter's education as opposed to allowing her to be miseducated within the school systems of the United States. I made it a point to take her to Africa with me when we travel, take her around the world when we travel so that she can learn history herself and then document what she's learned with others so that her peers, her contemporaries, could begin to learn to see Africa through the eyes of an African child. And so my daughter made her first trip to Africa when she was 7. We published her first book when she was 8. So that by the time that she went to college, she had published 2 books, and she's at college at Hampton University. And her professor is using my second book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, to teach world history. And half the students in her class grew up reading her first book. So I've been able to see the benefit of my work. And so now I've got a grandson who turned uh, 18 months old today.
Wow.
He's making his first international trip this Thursday. He's coming to the UK and Paris with us. He'll be traveling to Egypt with us next summer when I finish up my last tour to Egypt. And my grandson is on track. He's going to publish his first book when he's 5. The goal is to have him beat his mother's record by 3 years.
Right.
I've always been a staunch proponent of practical application of historical knowledge, which is the reason why I'm so excited to the program that we're doing this Saturday, talking to Black professionals to help them understand the power of knowledge of self and how you can use that knowledge wherever you are in your professional ladder to achieve success. But the greatest success you will ever achieve is building for your future generations, not making your bosses or your boss's corporation wealthier, but making your family wealthy and understanding the wealth is cannot always be broken down in dollars or pounds, as you all call them. The greatest
Mm,
wealth is tapping into or mining, if you will, the ancestral knowledge that we carry in our bodies.
right. Yes. Um, you brought up being a business owner and also the importance of being entrepreneurial, which you've been doing for the majority of your life.
Yes.
For a lot of people who are, well qualified professional people, that might seem like a really big step and quite scary as well. But you just talked about some benefits, not having to deal with, what we might describe as like the passive aggressive outlooks of your work colleagues,
Yes.
trying to undermine you in some way. Even I think you mentioned foolish Negroes, but you'd hope there'd be less of them. What kind of advice might you give people who are slightly trepidatious about taking that leap or step, which seems quite arduous?
Sure. Well, one of the things that I've learned through the study of history is that I've learned more about who we are as human beings, or to quote my dear friend, my brother, Professor James Small, who we are as spiritual beings having a human experience. And what I know, I only talk about what I know, not what I think, not what I believe, but what I can prove based on solid historical and scientific evidence. We are the vessels through which the Creator expresses itself. That's who human beings are. And when we look at what we've done in Africa, specifically before invasions, before colonizations. We can find the greatest records of human accomplishment in the history of the world. And what I know is that whatever the mind of a person perceives, they have the capacity to bring it to existence. So thoughts are things, thoughts are real. And so if you see yourself as someone who is competent, someone who is capable, then you can create those things that you bring into existence. And what I'm really beginning to understand now is that the knowledge that we gain from thinking correctly, if you will, is knowledge that exists within our DNA. Is something that Dr. Richard King talked about. He first had shared this conversation with me in 1989, that we carry the memories of our ancestors in us. And the other important thing that is really coming forward now is understanding the power of ancestors. Ancestors have the knowledge that can provide us with the information and the courage to do whatever we desire. You know, our ancestors, African ancestors, have the greatest degree of historical knowledge of any human beings on the planet. So I can speak specifically for African Americans. African Americans have been divorced from Africa, divorced from history and culture and value and all those things that make any people great. But yet we've been able to do things that most human beings have not been able to do. And I submit to you, my brother, that the reason why we've been able to do that is because we've been able to access ancestral knowledge, and circumstances have forced us to see that it's not folly, it's not foolish, it is real. And when we tap into the genius that resides within our genes, we're able to do things that quote unquote normal human beings don't do. That's a reality. And I've learned from experience that our oppressor knows this, and our oppressor will never teach us how to identify, how to amplify this power that we were born with. So it's about us knowing ourselves, knowing who we really are. And we are not imitation white folk. I have no desire to want to integrate into their disintegrating world. I have no desire to want to be equal to the greatest murderers and robbers on earth. I'm clear about who I am. I'm clear about what my ancestors have created. And as long as we tap into that knowledge, that power, there is nothing that we cannot do. As I mentioned, I don't have a PhD. I have a PhD in nothing. I have a PhD in nothing. Yet I've been able to do things that people with PhDs only dream of. And it's not because I'm smarter than anybody else. It's not because I have someone who's bankrolling my activities. It's because, well, to use your phrase, it's because I have unearthed the Black secret. I understand who we are as Black people and the powers that we possess. And as long as we remain true to that power, to those ancestors, there is nothing that we are unable to do.
You know, you mentioned the Black Secret. Now, one of the reasons why we've called ourselves the Black Secret is many people talk about history being like an iceberg. I know that you've mentioned this as well. In particular, Black history, it's kind of
Mhm,
like only 10 to 15% is made accessible to the
mhm.
general public or is easy to access. The
Sure.
rest seems to be hidden. But
Hmm.
what is hidden is absolutely beautiful. It's a beautiful jewel. And I know yourself and Robin have been working tirelessly and judiciously in terms of like publishing, bringing that information to us in the world of publishing. And I used to remember going back to the early 90s or mid 90s, when yourself and Robin were producing your seminal works and how that was transforming people's thinking. Yourself, Mario BT used to be known as the New Jack Scholars. You were
Yeah.
the
Okay. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
and I wanted to ask you and Robin and also Paul in a way, um, over the last 30 or so years, how much of that iceberg which has been hidden has come to the surface? And what do we need to do to continue to bring our rich history to the people?
Robert, why don't you take that?
Yeah, let me jump in. One of the things that I've learned is never assume that you know. Assume that there's more to be found, because there really is more to be found. Just to give an example, I received a commission last year to write a book on ancient African origins, which I submitted in April. And essentially, what I know about African history has grown by 50%, as much as that. And I've learned that even the 50% that it's grown by is nowhere near the complete picture. I have a feeling that because of the work of some of our great scholars, including Dr. Browder, including Runoko Rashidi, including Ivan van Sertima, including John Jackson, including Sheikh Anta Diop, we have probably mapped out the role of Africa in the ancient world. When it comes to Africa in the medieval world, I think we've mapped nothing out. Essentially, the Eurocentric scholars have said, okay, you guys can have Spain, you guys can have Portugal, and that's it. And then you look at German art, and there's Moors' heads all over the art.
Yeah.
You look at Latvian art, Moors' heads all over the place. And these Moors aren't supposed to have been there. We were told it was Spain and it was Portugal. That's it. And then you realize that we don't know that history. Why is there a tapestry called Wild Men and Moors? In the tapestry, for those people that don't know, there's a tapestry that is from Central Europe. On a modern map, it might be Switzerland or it might be Germany, where there's castles and there are black people in those castles. Those are the Moors, and they are being besieged by wild men. What on earth is that? What does that represent? We have no idea, in truth. So what it means then is the writing of African history, the writing of Black history, there's still so much more ahead of us.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you for that, Robin. Anthony, would you like to address the question?
Well, the only thing I could say is because of global warming, the icebergs are melting. Beneath the iceberg, we're finding these gems that have been buried in the soil. And those gems are revealing a truth that can no longer be hidden. We are moving into a time where secrets are being revealed. The key is having enough people who have the capacity to interpret these secrets and know how to apply this knowledge in their lives so that the secrets become normalized and become a part of our lives, such that we can pass them down to our descendants, and future generations will be able to profit from the work that we did to uncover this information. That's what it's all about at this particular point in time.
Right, absolutely. Paul, would you like to contribute?
I just look in terms of layers. Layers are coming out. The layers are being revealed more and more and more. And like Robin says, there is this gap of the so-called medieval period. Ironically, they call it the Dark Ages before it, and it seems to be they were very dark.
Indeed.
On all levels. So I just say to people, the layers are there, get ready. It's a bit like playing past the parcel. The layers will come off, get ready for the next revelation.
Yeah, very true, very true. Yeah, I think we just need to keep on doing the work. And there's just so much that's been hidden, so many hidden pages of history that we have to write. And yourself and Robin have made massive contributions to that. So thank you very much for that. Robin also mentioned a friend of ours who passed away sadly. That's Runoko Rashidi. He used to come over like yourself to the UK quite often and share his latest findings. He was very instrumental in showing the connectivity of Black people across the globe as well. And he sadly passed away quite recently. And I recently found out that you've been a producer on a documentary series about his life, entitled Global Assignment, The Life and Times of Runoko Rashidi. Would you like to share anything about that in terms of like what's involved with that and also, you know, where people can see it?
Sure. Thank you for that. Well, one of the responsibility of any historian is to give voice to the ancestors. And by giving voice to the ancestors, we ensure that they live forever. I did that first when my colleague Asa Hilliard passed in Egypt, August the 13th, 2007. So a year later, I created the ASA Restoration Project, where we raised money to excavate and restore Kushite tombs on the West Bank of Luxor, Egypt. I named it in honor of Asa Hilliard so that his name would live forever, as we were uncovering tombs of Africans whose names had been lost and forgotten for over 2,700 years. When Runoko passed, August the 2nd, and 4 years ago, then his loss, Runoko passed in Egypt as well.
Wow.
So to have two brothers close to me pass in the same location hurt. I mean, it hurt deeply. We had to, I had to use my contacts in Egypt to get Runoko's body transferred to a better morgue. We had to make arrangements to have his body shipped back to LA. We worked with his family to arrange his funeral and memorial service and see to it that he was properly buried. And after he was buried, as I was talking to some of my colleagues, we talked about what we can do to ensure that Runoko's memory will live on. And I had a friend who was there at the funeral, a brother by the name of Bob Lott, who had traveled to Egypt, traveled to West Africa, traveled to Spain with Runoko, and had documented many of his trips. We just decided that Bob would be the ideal person to direct this story on Runoko Rashidi. And I have some friends who have resources or access to resources. And we had a meeting, we got a budget together, and we produced a global assignment, The Life and Times of Dr. Runoko Rashidi. So if anyone is interested in seeing that documentary, you can purchase a copy at our website, ikg-info.com. You can purchase a digital download of that film. And it's another way of reaching an audience, a segment of our population that seems to have an aversion to reading, right? So we find other entry points to get people interested in reading and to also get them reading worthy information, right? That's the challenge that we're faced with now because we live in such a digital global society. We're confronted with a lot of misinformation, a lot of BS, if you will. And so to be in the presence of Robin and Paul today is special for me. Listening to Robin talk about that tapestry is what I live for, man. I don't know everything. I would never know everything. And every time I hear a new piece of information, it invigorates me, right? And so there's so much to be uncovered. And part of our responsibility is to excite other young people to follow in our footsteps so that they will achieve greater successes than the three of us could have ever imagined. And I'm the person who likes to do long range thinking, long range planning, and I have an understanding of what our Nile Valley ancestors understood, that there is no death. There is what they refer to as the Rahimi Misu, the repetition of the birth. that we've been here before. And one of the reasons why people like my colleagues are doing this work is because we've done this work before. It comes natural to us and we do it well. So I understand very clearly that we'll be back and we'll be doing this work better when we come back because we've laid a foundation now for us to build on. And those are the good times that I'm certainly looking forward to.
Yeah, the great ancestors, Runoko Rashidi, who we knew quite well, also Asa Hilliard, perhaps they, in a way, chose to go home to pass,
Not perhaps, brother. I can tell you in my conversation with Dr. Hilliard's eldest daughter, she told me in no uncertain terms when she said goodbye to her father in Atlanta. She said, Dad, I don't want to let you go because I know I'm not going to see you again. And he said,
Wow.
that's okay. You have to. So on a certain level, these people who are doing the work on the physical realm, but who are also anchored to ancestors on the spiritual realm. They know. Martin Luther King knew when his time was up. Malcolm X knew when his time was up, and they fearlessly did what they knew they were born to do. They fearlessly fulfilled their cosmic assignment because that was their soul's commitment in this lifetime. So when we think about life and lives on this level, we free ourselves from mental slavery and we become who we truly are. And that's the next step for African people, wherever we may find ourselves in the world, to realize what spirit is, to embrace who ancestors and what ancestors are, and to fearlessly strengthen those bonds so that we can move through the difficult times that we're going to be facing globally and still be able to document who we were, to achieve unprecedented successes and establish a Black print for the generations behind us to follow. That's what we've always done. And we're here in this lifetime to do it better than we've done previously. And we're going to do it even better in the lifetimes to come.
You've touched upon the idea of we carry our greatness, our past, the ancestors inform us. And I know that you in particular have had a chance to study, work with, and sit at the feet of some of our great scholars from the 70s and 80s, Ivan Van Settema, Dr. Ben Jokinen,
John Henry Clark.
John
Dr. Clark out.
Clark, yeah.
Yes,
Also, and I suppose my question on that front would be, how have they influenced you and how have they made you who who you actually are in this present moment? Because that's such a great influence. You've stood on the shoulders of some of the greatest that we've had in recent years. What have you learned from that? And I would also like to ask Robin as well, and Paul, what you've actually learned from your teachers and how have they helped to shape and guide you to become who you are and achieve what you have. But I'd like you to go first, Anthony, and talk about Henry Clark and the others.
I mentioned meeting Ivan Van Sertima on February the 21st, 1977. I remember the day. I know exactly where I was when the light came on for me. My second encounter with Van Sertima and Dr. Hilliard was in September of 1984 in Atlanta at the 4-day Nile Valley Conference. As I sat in that auditorium, I was introduced to Charles Finch. I was introduced to Naim Akbar. I was introduced to a plethora of scholars, Egyptologists, historians, mathematicians, scientists. Wow. And as I sat in that audience, I said, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do with my life. And I want to bring these people to Washington, D.C. and introduce them to my community. So it took me 3 years to make that happen. But between 1987 and 1994, I, through my business, created a lecture series, the Free Your Mind lecture series. And all of the scholars that I knew and admired, I brought them to DC to lecture. And because I'm a businessman, I understand that my relationship with these scholars was one based on history and admiration, but it was also one based on business. So every time they came to DC, they would be guaranteed of having a full house. They would be guaranteed of getting paid on time. They would be guaranteed of selling all of their merchandise. So my relationship with these scholars existed on multiple levels simultaneously. And because they knew that I was a person of my word, they knew that I was a person, as Asa said, I can take complex information and reduce it to simple, easy to digest ideas. I mean, and I'm not trained as a historian. I'm an artist by training, right? And I'm embracing my artistic training. And so I can look at a building. I could read a book and just distill the essence of that book, the essence of that building into simple talking points. And like Dr. Ben, following in his footsteps, like John Henry Clark, like John Jackson, I write in simple, easy to understand language such that the reader now sees images in their minds based on the words that I have on the paper. So I've been using, my design skills, my marketing skills to produce content that is designed to get into the minds of my target audience and move them in a specific direction. So to have walked with some of the greatest minds of the 20th century has been my blessing. And it's created opportunities for me to sit and have this discussion with you and two other brothers who I admire as well.
Thank you very much for that. Robin, do you want to go next?
No, I think Paul should go next because I think there's more of a direct link.
Okay. Paul?
There's one word that I know Tony always uses, and that's consistency. Another word is integrity. I first got switched on by the Browder file, having studied about the development of race and racism. And then I had to open the door to African history. The Browder file, exactly how Tony speaks, it just said there, he writes in pictures. And I'm an artist as well by training. I'm an art teacher by training. And so it was a very similar thing which linked in straight away. Just to follow on from what he said about the Nile Valley Conference 1984, there was a lecture by Dr. Naeem Akbar called The Nile Valley Origins of the Science of the Mind. And I think that was the single, I'd say that was the single lecture which just changed my life, simply changed my life. And so having had the pleasure of working through Tony, I've got to say as well, because there's Tony's contacts, because that's another thing you have to look at. The thing with Tony is that he knows everybody. And he put me in contact with like everybody and anybody. I used to have a very, very big phone bill per month. This back in the days where there's no free dialing. So that's been the thing. And what I will say is it's the humility and the humor of the people that have met, the people who are writing the books, doing the research. God rest his soul, I remember being with Tony with Dr. Patricia Newton in DC. And I was planning a conference, and I can remember if anybody had been sitting and watching the conversation, they might have thought, oh yeah, these brothers and sisters are so radical, strong scholars and whatever. We just having jokes. And that's what I've always found is it's the humility and the humor that always stays with me, and makes the load lighter as well. You shouldn't have a heavy heart, as the Ma'atian ethics say. Your heart's meant to be in balance with the feather. And being heavy-hearted and angry and whatever, I don't think I've come across anybody. Yeah, people can fire, but most of the time, just good humans.
Right. So it's important to be humble and to have humility, discipline, and ethics as well.
Serve the knowledge. Serve the knowledge.
Serve the
Serve
knowledge.
the knowledge. Yeah, yeah.
But to also be unafraid.
Secret of life is to have no fear.
Yeah.
And I'm blessed because in my Igbo, I'm Igbo by descent through my father. We have a nature called Ekwensu, and Ekwensu is the spirit that all other spirits fear. So there has to be a fearlessness that goes on, and that's every day. I've been battling with ChatGPT most of today.
Oh wow!
It's been very interesting.
My goodness, that's some battle. I hope I never have it though.
Yeah. It's funny.
Yeah. Robin, how about your influences?
My story pretty much began in the late 1980s. What happened was I was recruited into a jazz orchestra called the Jazz Warriors, and that was founded by Courtney Pine and his wife. And they were very, very much very serious about culture. And it was under the influence of the Jazz Warriors where I began to read books. And they would tell me I need to read jazzmen's autobiographies. And it was that way that I learned about the African American struggle. And it was there where I became, I learned the importance that if you're dealing with culture, you have to treat it as something very, very serious, life and death type of thing. All right, during that period, I moved into a household where the father of the house was Ghanaian, the mother of the house was Trinidadian, and they had a strange book in their library with a very strange title. It was called The Destruction of Black Civilization. And what happened was when I finished university, I promised myself I would read that book. And I ended up reading it 5 times. And ultimately, that book began to change my life. Then the influence of Courtney Pine. He was into a scholar with a strange name, Yusuf Ben Yochanan. So I had to get hold of that author's work and read it. And eventually I met the leading light of Black studies in London, Dr. Femi Biko, and he was the one that got me into John Jackson. And being a part of the quote unquote Afrocentric scene, whenever people like Naim Akbar was in town, we would go to see him lecture. Jacob Carruthers was in town. And I don't think Paul knows this, but I did my teacher training at a university that was outside Liverpool. And that was
at Chill College.
Yeah. And what that was is that because we were up north now, we found out that there was somebody called Paul Obinna. And so the idea was, could we get him to speak at our college? And I think we booked you to speak about 6 or 7 times. Don't know if you remember any of that, but that happened. And so what happened was we were able to put on basically African-centered conferences at a university outside Liverpool, of all places. And we brought in, and the other people that we had speak, we had people like Saba also speaking. We had various other people. So we put on some very, very powerful content. And that content, again, was me learning. And it wasn't long after that I decided to put pen to paper. And then when I began to put pen to paper, that's when the books started to appear.
Wow. Wow. Powerful. Powerful. Yes. Anthony, I wanted to explore your connection with Egypt. I don't know how many times you've been there. I think, is it currently 68 or something?
68, yes, 68
Wow,
times.
68 visits to Egypt. Now, I believe you're in the process of writing a paper or a book, Why Kmet Matters. And I wanted to ask you, why does Kmet matter?
Hmm.
And is Kemet different from Egypt?
Yeah, Kemet is as different from Egypt as Barack Obama is from Donald Trump.
Okay.
All right. Kemet is the original name of the country that the Greeks renamed Egypt. Robin mentioned Chancellor Williams's classic, The Destruction of Black Civilization. Chancellor Williams was one of the first scholars to use the word Kim to describe Nile Valley civilization. So much of what we've been taught about our history and culture has been watered down, has been falsified. So I made my first trip to Egypt with Dr. Ben. I saw that I had been miseducated, and I began reading and studying more so that I could free my mind. And once I freed my mind, I sought to free others in my community as possible. And Kemet is where we find the greatest documentation of human accomplishments in the world, at least over 3,000 years
Hmm.
of documented evidence, writing, history, culture, architecture, medicine, engineering, medicine. It's all there. It's all there, and it's all African. And so this effort to Kemet, turn Kemet into Egypt, and then take Egypt out of Africa represents an effort on the part of Europeans to separate us from our real power. And what I came to understand, specifically during the 15 years that we were excavating tombs on the West Bank of Luxor, we started off in 2008 working on 3 tombs. We ended last season after having discovered over 40 tombs. We have found the
Wow.
largest Kushite necropolis on the West Bank. And what I now have come to know, what I now have come to understand, is that when those African teachers and priests and priestesses and builders, when they looked into the future and saw the inevitable, saw the Kemet was going to fall, saw the Nile Valley civilizations were going to fall, then they made plans to parcel up their knowledge and move it further west for safekeeping to West Africa. And there are instances now which I'm researching and documenting, looking at various cultures in West Africa, in Ghana, Senegal, Gambia, the Ivory Coast, Mali, where in their ancestral record, their historical record, they talk of their ancestors having migrated there from the Nile Valley. And
Yeah.
so it's about connecting the pieces of this puzzle together to see how Africans have spread their knowledge. And so my thinking, my understanding is if these priests and scholars had enough foresight to see what was coming in the destruction of Nile Valley civilization, they had to have seen the destruction of Niger Valley civilization and the further dispersal of African people to the Caribbean, to South America, to North America. They had to have seen that this was coming. And what I've now come to understand is, yeah, they saw it coming and they made preparations to deal with that. So they've hidden their secrets in plain sight, which is the theme associated with our Egypt on the Potomac field trips that we've been doing for 39 years now, showing how the secret knowledge, the history, the culture, the architecture, the symbolism, the philosophy has been embedded in Washington, D.C., in London, in Paris, in Germany, throughout the world. So Why Kmet Matters is my synthesis of all of this information to show that the essence of African people, history and culture, the spirit of African history and culture is all over the world. So I decided this year that I wasn't going to Egypt. I'm doing my Why Kmet Matters tour, and we're coming to London on Friday, and then we're going to Paris 4 days later. We're going to visit the British Museum. We're going to visit the Louvre. We're going to visit the greatest crime scenes on the planet.
Hmm.
The greatest collections of Kemetic culture and art and history and symbolism is in Europe. They've got things in the British Museum that they don't even have in Egypt. So to be able to bring over a group of people to visit these facilities and to come with a certain consciousness to know what we're coming to see, to know the power associated with what we're looking at, and to know how to call forth from those objects the power, the spirit of the ancestors who created them is a way of reconnecting our minds, our hearts, and our souls. So that the objective of this Why Kmet Matters tour to London and Paris is to connect with brothers and sisters like yourself so that we can see that our struggles and our triumphs are global. And that when we unite, when we realize that there are no barriers separating us, the only barrier is in our mind, right? So when we cultivate this consciousness that has always been inside of us, waiting for this moment to be unearthed, then there are no obstacles that can stand in our way as we move forward. And we then just have to decide where we want to go and the best road to get there.
Yeah, you mentioned the restoration projects, the ASA Restoration Project, which has taken place, I think, in El Asifa, and
Uh,
the impact which you've had, starting
mhm.
off from just dealing with a small number of tombs, it's now spread to, they've discovered so much there, so much has been unearthed because of your work. And I think that was a collaboration with Dr. Elena
Elena
Pitch,
Pistakova,
Pitch the
uh,
Cover, yes. I mean,
who
would you like to give us a little bit more of an insight into how all of that came into being?
Sure. It was really it was really a matter of ASA died in 2007, and my colleague, my dear friend, my brother, my Egyptian brother, Abunaga Gabriel, who I had worked with for 21 years, had been encouraging me to come to Egypt early, just by myself, so that he could take me on a tour of the Western Desert. He created the tours of the Western Desert. So a couple of hundred miles from Cairo, between Cairo and Luxor, there are temples, there are tombs, there are monuments that the average tour group doesn't see. And I took him up on his offer. I came to Egypt early. We got a four-wheel drive vehicle, a satellite phone, a driver, and supplies, and we hit the desert. And this brother showed me things that blew my mind. I found dinosaur bones in the middle of the desert, shark's teeth in the middle of the desert. I've had a transformative experience that prepared me for what was to come. And when we got to Luxor, he sent his nephew over to the house to to bring me to the site where Dr. Pistakova had been excavating for 2 years. She had begun the partial excavation of the 25th dynasty tomb of a priest named Karaka Men, and she had run out of money. And as she gave me a tour of this partially excavated tomb, I could hear Asa Hilliard in one ear and Dr. Clark in the other ear say, "Hey, Tony, this is what we prepared you for. You can step up and you can assume responsibility for raising the money so that this work can continue." Now, I'm not a fundraiser, but I've been able to raise over 15 years $3 million so that
Wow.
the work could continue. We
Yeah.
had on our payroll over 140 people working for us. So I was able to enter a game that I technically wasn't qualified to play. And I've done what experts in the field have not done. And I know that that was the ancestors working through me. I was attentive, I was obedient, I was in the right place at the right time, and ancestors are now showing us the results of doing that. I'm not special. I'm no better than anybody else. I'm no smarter than anybody else. I just happen to have learned things that all of us should have learned. And so it's about spreading this knowledge with others who are now interested in learning because we now see that the world is turning upside down. The world is waiting for free African minds to assume responsibility for setting the world right side up. That is what time it is. And so our gathering, our meeting at the Africa Center on Saturday will provide an opportunity for people who want to be a part of this grand awakening to come and hear three brothers who have dedicated their lives to studying our history and culture, show them how it was done. You know, we're not talking about what we want to do. We're showing folks what we have done, right? And we want to amplify our numbers so that we can do the things that African people must do at this particular point in time in history if we're going to save the world.
Yes.
That's the time it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, I was in Egypt at the start of the year. I was invited to come over to celebrate New Year's Day over there. And I was situated on the West Bank. So I was with the community. So I didn't do the hotel stuff. And I had a chance to actually visit El Asifa. Yeah, and I had a chance to visit some of the newest sort of like excavations. I think one of them is Babasha. And for me, what I wanted to ask you was, for me, you know, it's not just an incredible. These are not just incredible historic sites. These are sacred spaces, and each one. And I had a chance to go into several of the different tombs, Ramoses, Senefa, Ramesses II, Ramesses III. They're all different. These are sacred spaces. And I wanted to ask you, what was it like for you entering the tomb of Krakamun and the others for the first time when you were there?
Because of the fact that I'm an artist, and I have some background, some training in architecture. I took architectural classes my last 2 years of high school. I majored in architecture my freshman year in college. And as a matter of fact, Robin, you mentioned the destruction of Black civilization. One of my architecture professors at the University of Illinois, Dr. Murray, the pillars, did all of the illustrations for Chancellor Williams's destruction of Black civilization, right?
Oh, wow.
So when I go into these spaces, I go in like an artist or an architect. I'm putting myself in the mindset of the architects and the engineers who created this space, of the artists and designers who designed the artwork, the carvings and the paintings. And I literally see what they saw. I understand. And it's that process that helped me find the steps leading to Karakamin's burial chamber. And I feel their presence. I know what they know. So I can say, while I have no formal training in Egyptology, I have no formal training in archaeology, I've done what Egyptologists and archaeologists haven't done because I'm tapped into a different source of knowledge. But the most important takeaway for me was this, brother, that I came to understand that every time we discover a new tomb, we make it possible to speak the name of an ancestor who was lost to time for over 2,000 years. And every time we would pour libation, we would call that ancestor forth. And so we were literally doing what Sammy was doing in the juke joint scene in Sinners. We were calling the ancestors to take us in your arms tonight, bringing them forward. Those ancestors came down and they moved obstacles out of our way. They kept us safe. They made it possible for them to now move in their ancestral homeland. So we've got access to those ancestors and so many more. That's been our superpower. So now it's about using these connections, using what I refer to as the original AI, ancestral intelligence, and allowing that to guide us forward and carve out the path that we are creating for our children, for our grandchildren, for our great-grandchildren, for our great-great-grandchildren. And that's what this whole thing is about because, and I'll close on this note, I've also have found a tomb in North Asasif that lays out this formula, that basically says, if I can paraphrase, the inscription at the entrance to this tomb, it says, "To you who have not been born, come inside of my space and look around and restore what is here. Amen will bless you if you restore what is here." That was the ancestors 2,700 years ago anticipating their return as us, right?
Wow.
Their return is us, saying, come in, look around, reacquaint yourself with what you did before, and now do it better than it's ever been done. That's the mission. That's the cosmic assignment. So, I'm always pleased to be in partnership with brothers and sisters who understand that, and we get it done. And we get it done better than most. So we're going to do it this Saturday, and like Sammy did in Sinners, we're gonna tear the roof off the sucker, as Parliament Funkadelic would say.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Sorry, Tony, could you mention the Sankofa symbol?
Okay. So it was on September 28th, 2016. I visited a tomb in North Osasif. And again, because of my artistic leaning, whenever I step into a space, I'm looking around for any and everything to see what it means. And being the only person of African ancestry in that space, I looked up at the ceiling and I saw this pattern in the ceiling, very faint pattern in the ceiling, and it was the Akoma Sankofa symbol. So I've been able to trace the origin of that symbol all the way back to about 1200 BC on a piece of pottery in Kush. And I just recently found last year a piece of pottery that was created in the 3rd century BCE, I believe, 3rd century BCE, of the Sankofa bird that was also created in Kush. So I'm now able to track the migration of an Adinkra symbol, the origins of an Adinkra symbol from the Nile to the Niger, and document its use among the Akan to honor new ancestors. So we're connecting dots like never before, and it's a confirmation for me that now is the time to be doing this work.
Wow. So we're building, because I do know that there are many cultures and traditions in West Africa, including the Akan, that, if you speak to certain people, they will tell you that they migrated from
Absolutely.
Egypt. If they don't know you that well, they may not say anything to you.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have actual evidence in Kush and also in Egypt that there is, or the, it's building that there is this connection through the symbols. Yeah. Wow, fantastic. Paul, I wanted to bring you in on this and ask you, because I know that you've been to Egypt as well. Concerning the sacredness of the tombs, what was your experience like? Also, I would like to ask you, and then Robin, what does the term Kmet mean to you versus Egypt?
The first time I heard the term Kmet was from Free Your Mind by Dr. Hilliard, Asa Hilliard and Listerbout Middleton. And that just opened up, wow, so I've always had this thing about comparisons. Being of mixed parentage, I was always informed that my father's people had achieved nothing, but my mother's people had done everything. So when I started to write things down and draw things down, more importantly, I did the comparisons, I just said, this is a nonsense. And this is all the European data as well. It wasn't with any African-centered data. This is European data. So Kemet became, I had to start, I always differentiate between Kemet and Egypt. So somebody will say, oh, ancient Egypt. I say that's 332 BC on the short chronology. I've got to say short chronology because Robin's here, the headmaster. So I say 332 BC. So before that, it was Kemet. So I differentiate between the two. Going into the tombs, I had to pray forgiveness for going in there. But then I very quickly realized, I think it was 2022, I was in Luxor on Tony's tour. And I think that's when I really, really realized that what these people did, they knew that what was going to happen. And basically the tombs are time capsules. And so I pray, ask my forgiveness. And then I would go in there and absorb whatever I could from the experience. And so that's again, it just humility towards the knowledge. And I was so pleased. My son, who's now 16, he was in Egypt last week, and with his mother, and I kind of had my nose put out because I wanted to take him there, you know, but just I realized all of a sudden it wasn't about me. It was about he was getting that experience, and because he's one of his names is ASA, named for Dr. Hilliard. I said to him, when you go to Luxor, you go to the temple, I said, just spend a little moment remembering your namesake. And so when you go in there, remember the information that has come through and the fact that you're here. So I love, there's a deep significance with Asa Hilliard's Master Keys video. I promote, when on Saturday at the event, I'll have a notebook as an accompaniment to the lineage timeline, which goes through the Master Keys video and shows you which points along the chronological order is right there. And I've got to mention Robin here. I call him the headmaster. I don't know about me having an influence on him. All I think about him, he's our British standard. So, forgive the term, but that's if you can run it by, it's a bit like the real McCoy. If you can run it by Walker, you could say more or less you got to get the standard met. So it's having that kind of humility. It's the fun, it's the service, etc.
Yeah.
So there.
Yeah. So I think you've just given me a new idea. So things have to meet the Walker standard. Perhaps we can make
Oh hell yeah! I've seen that guy.
Yeah.
I've seen that guy terrorize academics. So
yeah,
I
they're
remember
definitely scared of Robin Walker.
I took a timeline to Robin. That's oh my gosh, it has to be by 2001 or something like that. We're in Stockwell at New Initiatives, and we're in the office together. And I remember opening the timeline to show him. I started correcting myself straight away. I didn't have to do anything. I started correcting myself. So I have that kind of thing. I remember Robin pulling me about I was doing a session for Michael and Manning's group, and I made reference to the denary number system carved in snakes at the wall of Saqqara, and this voice just said, actually, Brother Paul. Actually, Brother Paul. And then he broke down what had happened with the mischief. So yeah. That's the thing. I love having that kind of correction or get something wrong.
Yeah. I think what makes Robin so dangerous is his background in economics. So he has this kind of like way of dealing with history, which is very precise. And that scares the mainstream, because they can't really argue with his arguments, you know, about Black Africa and the fact that Africa has history. There was a time in the early 1980s where I know people who tried to do their thesis on African history, and they were told by their professors if they talked about Africa having real civilization, they forget it, you know. So, Headmaster, what does the term Kemet mean to you compared to and versus Egypt?
Let me give you some background. The African Heritage Forum, led by Arthur Torrington, gave me and some other people a commission to write a book called From Narmer's Kemet to Cleopatra's Egypt.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And inspired by, among other things, Dr. Browder's book. The first 3/4 of our book, where we're dealing with the history of Kemet, we use only African names. So when we're dealing with the names of the civilizations, when we're dealing with the names of the cities, when we're dealing with the names of the deities, we are using only the ancient Egyptian terms. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And when we get to the Greek period, that's when we start to use Egypt, and the terms that people use today. So the idea was to make it quite clear that on a map, Egypt and Kemet is in the same place, but it doesn't refer to the same time period, and it doesn't refer to which period was indigenous and which period is the period where we get conquerors and invaders ruling. Does that make sense? And so what was good is we were able to produce a book which is available for download. So you chaps, if you want to check it out, African Heritage Forum, from Names, Kemet to Cleopatra's Egypt, you can get this book on download. And the idea was to have a properly designed book in color that primary schools have access to, that makes it quite clear which period is Kemet, which period is Egypt.
Yes, that's a beautiful book. And it reminds me of something which I'd like to ask you about, Anthony. The book features on the cover a really nice illustration of Cleopatra. However, they've represented the book is fantastic. It's absolutely amazing. The only issue that I've got is with the cover, which represents Cleopatra as a black woman. Now, there has been some recent controversy. I know this is a very old discussion. People have, in academics, like to, the real discussion is, was Cleopatra the VII admixed to some degree? Whereas now people have flattened it to, oh, are they describing her as a black woman? And I know you have a particular take on this because she's not the most prominent queen. We've got Hatshepsut, we've got lots of others as well. What's your take on it, sir?
My take on this, brother, is simple. Cleopatra is closer to the invention of the iPhone than she is the construction of the Great Pyramid. Cleopatra comes at the end of Kemetic history and culture and greatness. She is insignificant. There have been different interpretations of who she was. I just read an article recently that mentioned that Cleopatra was descended from the daughter of a Macedonian king. So I don't know, and to be honest with you, I don't care. Cleopatra is insignificant. In the overall scope of things, she's insignificant. Let them debate Cleopatra because they're trying to get a foothold into Egypt. I want to focus on Kemet. Why aren't we talking about Queen T? Right? Why aren't we talking about Queen T? The statue of Queen T and her husband, Amenhotep III, is the largest statue in the Cairo Museum. She was a co-regent. She was as powerful as her husband was. And her husband was responsible for building, and you probably saw this when you were on the West Bank, the so-called Colossus of Memnon was a temple that was built by Amenhotep III. Now, I've lived on the West Bank when we're doing our work, so I've had conversations with people who own the land on either side of that spot, people who worked at that spot. And I can tell you this, brother, that complex, of which we only see the ruins, was larger than Karnak Temple.
Wow, that is immense. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So Queen T was a co-regent of Amenhotep III. Queen T was the mother of Amenhotep IV, Akhenaten. Queen T was the grandmother of Tutankhamun, one of the most insignificant so-called pharaohs in Kemetic history. And so it's about us shifting the narrative. I don't care about Cleopatra. I really don't. I care about those people who were responsible for creating the culture and civilization that the world wants to claim as their own and doesn't want to acknowledge is in fact African. So if I can steal your role for a minute and ask a question of Robin, build on something that Paul alluded to a little while ago. Hey, Robin, can you talk briefly about the long chronology of Kemet?
So, Tony, I was just going to ask that myself.
Well, I beat you to the punch, brother. I felt your thought, your vibe. So why is there so much controversy over the long chronology of Kemet, Robin?
This is what it is. I encourage all of us to study how the timeline of ancient Egypt was put together. Yeah. Why am I saying this? Because when you look at how the timeline was put together in the first place, the only conclusion you can draw is the long chronology. In other words, the so-called short chronology, where Egypt begins around 3200 BC, 3100 BC, is a total fake and doesn't stand up to any scrutiny. It really doesn't. Now, that fake was put together by a German scholar called Eduard Meyer. And then a version of it was popularized by his American student, James Henry Breasted. And what Breasted did was to put the fake chronology in books and mass produced. And that mass production resulted in a generation of scholars essentially being schooled on fakery. Mm-hmm. Now, some people will say, but there must be some truth to it. No, there isn't. As I said, do your own reading. This is what it is. How we know ancient Egypt's timeline is an Egyptian priest was commissioned to write a book on it. His name was Manetho, and he was writing in 241 BC. And he was commissioned by the Greek ruler, Ptolemy Philadelphus, write me a chronology of the country. And that book came out, it was called Egyptiaca. Now, it hasn't survived in its original form, but people quote it. And there's enough quotations of it for us to reconstruct the timeline. And then when you start counting backwards, the different dynasties and count backwards, you get to the very first king. He calls him Menes, but the name that we would use today would be Namer. And the time period that he gives for this king, Menes or Namer, is 5655 BC. Right? Now, people will tell me, but Robin, weren't there simultaneous dynasties at certain parts of the history? Yes, there were. But even when you account for the simultaneous dynasties at certain parts in the history, you still get 5655 BC. Right? And so what happens is people now have to lie. And this is how it's done. You present dynasties 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17, and you say that all of them reigned in 208 years. And in that way, you can make the end of dynasty 12 and the beginning of dynasty 18 208 years. Here's the problem. Dynasty 13 is 453 years. How do you fit 453 years of just one dynasty in 208 years? It can't be done. So what you then do is you don't tell everybody that that's what the sources say. And essentially it's by lying and fakery that they make certain periods of history shrink and then shrink and then shrink. And once you do that, yeah, you can come with 3200, 3100 BC. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Then you end up with other fakery. According to Herodotus, how long does it take to build the Great Pyramid? Anyone want to hazard a guess?
He said 20-something years, 22 years, something like that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he said 20 years to put brick on top of brick and 10 years to clear the causeway, 30 years. Yeah. Okay. According to the short chronologists, Pharaoh Khufu reigned 23 years. Mm-hmm. How's that possible? How is it possible for a pyramid built by Pharaoh Khufu to have taken longer to have built his pyramid than it was for him to have reigned? How's that possible? Yeah. And it's these sorts of idiocies that mainstream Egyptologists have been allowed to get away with. And as I said, it doesn't stand up. The short chronology stands up to no scrutiny whatsoever.
May I play devil's advocate? For a long period of time, I used to go for the middle chronology.
Yeah.
Is that more viable?
Let me answer that.
Yeah.
There is no voting Liberal Democrat. Oh, let American, American. Let me explain to the Americans here. In politics, we have in this country the Labour Party, which is roughly speaking left wing, Conservative Party, roughly speaking right wing. The middle position is Liberal Democrat. There is no voting Liberal Democrat in this situation because you still have the same problem of how do you fit dynasties 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. How do you fit that into 208 years? Can't be done. And the middle chronology has exactly that problem. I mean, big love to Charles Finch. Dr. Finch, if you're listening, it's all love, sir, but I have to disagree with you. Dr. Chinwezu, it's all love, sir, but I have to disagree with you.
Right. So they just ignore certain data basically.
No, can I make it? Sorry, can I make a point?
Yeah.
The point is the reason when I did the timeline and I used the short chronology is because that mistaken state is the one that most people will get in the history books.
Yeah.
Even with that, it explodes the foolishness of the European argument. But then what I've done on this version, I put a marker down showing Robin's long chronology, the Walker chronology. I've also put on Charles Finch's chronology as well. The idea is that we make it we put those things down so we have the conversation. And then eventually, after a while, I'm hoping I'll work with Robin to make the long chronology on the timeline. And that should be the one that's taken to the museums. That should be the one that's popularized. But that's when we build a critical mass of people saying, hey, that's not right. At the moment, there's a move to shut down any of the African history. And my argument with ChatGPT, it's actually today said that anytime you ramp with any classical forms of imageries, you want to change the images, ChatGPT starts to mess around and won't do as you ask. Literally just today. So it's about getting that integrity, keeping the persistence, and making sure that we use the work of Robin and we get it to compare with the standard version that's taught now.
Yes. Yeah. Paul, I actually wanted to ask you about the Cleopatra thing, because I know that you've got a very interesting background with that. I mean, for me, it's kind of like the shifting of positions. Like Anthony, I don't like to go into it because I think it's a proxy argument. We know what the positions really are. It's really an attack on the work that we've done, about showing and proving that Africa is that Kemet is fundamentally a Black civilization and connected with other Nile Valley civilizations. It's about undermining our credibility by making it seem that we are trying to claim things which obviously aren't fully African or not African, aka Cleopatra. And so I don't get involved with that. But you've got a very interesting position on that, I believe, sir.
Well, my thing, all you're talking about basically is sexual availability of a queen to two white dudes. And then it's actually the time when it's a crossover between Greece and Rome, and who runs Egypt at that point. And so I personally, like Tony said, I kind of say, well, who is she? What is she? What's it? Now, Hollywood blows that up. You know, Hollywood's always blown it up and sort of made it give that perception that that Egyptians were white. And I'll turn around and readily say, yeah, they were. The Kemites weren't. And so you've got to be very, very clear and precise on that. So it's like Tony showed me the Blanchfield mural in the Library of Congress, and it says that Egypt is the first of the influencing factors upon the United States. And it says Egypt is the source of written records, and it's a white pharaoh. Fair enough. We got to know Kemet. We must know Kemet because we differentiate, therefore. And So yeah, I'm hoping, George, you're not implying about my personal kind of indirect contact to that.
I wouldn't say anything. I wouldn't say anything, sir.
You are a stirrer, sir. You are a cat. You're a cat and a bounder.
Some things
But
are
no,
better left unsaid, huh?
Yeah,
okay. Yeah.
No,
Okay.
it's like my now ex-wife. She made the Netflix series on Queen and Zinga and Cleopatra, and so I watched it with interest, and I mean that by seriousness as well. I think it's good that we're having some focus upon there, but you got to look at the background. Why is there this interest coming from the European background? So for instance, I remember told Tony one time that there's Samtek the First. There's a documentary called the Pharaoh in the Suburbs, and they found this giant statue of, I think, 24 dynasty pharaoh called Samtek the First, and they were bigging this thing up. You know, the documentary makers are saying how important this was. This is one of the most important statues. Yeah, it was important because Samtek the First removed the immigration restrictions that allowed the Greek scholars to come in and learn at the feet of and ascertain, gain the wisdom from the Kemites. And it's the Kemites at that time. So look at, it's like there's an old communication studies saying, it says who is saying what to whom, in what channel, with what reason, and with what effect. And that's what I love Robin's work for. That's what I love Tony's work for, is because it gives us the question mark of critical thinking. It gives us the idea of the Uraeus, that the Uraeus, or the Arat, which has ever got the vigilant eyes open to check out what we're being given.
Absolutely. So let me add to something that Paul just said. Paul referenced Samtek the First. What we have found in our excavation and restoration of the 25th dynasty tombs, we found that members of the royal family of Samtek the Second usurped our tombs, the Kushite tombs. Why? Because they were immaculately designed tombs. So why invest a whole lot of money building a new tomb when all you need to do is dispose of the original body and put your body there? So we have instances of Karakamin's name being plastered over and the name of a member of Samtek's royal family being buried in that spot. We have instances about 2 or 3 years ago. The third tomb that we had was known as the tomb of Itieru. She was a member of the court of Samtek II, and she had usurped that tomb. It wasn't until about 2021, I think, was when we excavated the Sun Court that we found the name of the original owner of that tomb. It had been plastered over, right? So we found the name of the original owner, and then we also found the capstone to a pyramidion. So there are secrets still buried in the sand in Egypt, waiting to be uncovered by sisters and brothers who are willing to invest their time, their talent, and their treasure. And we're literally rewriting history. And that's what the current Egyptian government and the United States government, I can say from personal experiences, and governments elsewhere want to stop. That's why there's been this increase anti-African sentiments, anti-Afrocentric sentiments, or Afrophobia in Egypt, in the United States, and elsewhere in the world, because we're getting too close. We're getting too close, and they must do everything within their power to keep this information suppressed and keep us from uncovering the real timeline. Because once that real timeline comes forth, game over. So they're fighting for their lives. I understand it. I'm not angry at them because I know why they're fighting as ruthlessly as they are, as they have been. They're fighting for their lives. And once those lives have been exposed, game over. So we have to up our game, and we have to recruit more people with more resources so that we can continue doing our job better than we had before.
Anthony, I think that this is a perfect place to draw the conversation to a close. I mean, having been to Assafa and Luxor, and the valley of the tombs of the nobles and the valleys of the kings. The new tombs which have been excavated, you go into Pabasha's tomb, and they are chocolate brown. The people who worked for him, the images of Pabasha meeting Osiris, kneeling before Osiris right at the very top. It's a black man with a bald head kneeling down to Osiris, Aset. The more that is being revealed, the blacker Egypt actually appears. So they can't really win unless they do a lot of funky restoration work afterwards.
Well, look, the other thing is, majority of people will never travel to Egypt. They'll never go into the tombs to see what you saw this past year. But they will watch documentaries. They will watch movies. And these films have the capacity to brainwash more people than we could ever imagine. So it's about us doing the research, uncovering the knowledge, and producing books, yes, doing study tours, yes, but also producing the documentaries, producing the digital media that will reach more people than we could ever imagine. So this is a battle for the minds and the souls of people, African people all over the planet, and people with goodwill all over the planet. And what we're witnessing, what I can say from personal experiences, what I'm witnessing here in the United States of America is the beginning of the end. They are desperate, and desperate people make foolish mistakes. They bomb nations that they have no business bombing. They support people who are destroying and wiping out other civilizations. So the anti-American sentiments is growing all over the world, and the stage is set for the changing of the guard. We just have to be ready for that, be on the right side of history, and be prepared to rebuild again.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask everyone for their closing statements, what they want to leave the audience with. I'd like to begin with Paul, and then Robin, and then I'll leave the stage to you, Anthony.
Please come through on Saturday. It's an honor for me. I'm John the Baptist to the Christ consciousness these two guys are going to drop. I hope to not lose my head though. And so please come through onto that. I think getting more clarity, getting critical thinking and clarity is one of the most major things that we can get in these times, especially with the amount of information, misinformation that's flying around at the present time. So I personally have a thing, I call it tabling. I don't let things into my mind immediately. I put it on a table and then rationalize it through. I don't just let it in. So especially in these times where there's so much emotional content flying around, I have to be very careful. So that's what I should do. But come through on Saturday. It should be a romp. It should be a good event.
And so I think you're going to bring the fire like John the Baptist.
Well, that's it. That's the thing. I just hope there's no dancing girls there. That's it.
Okay. Robin.
Obviously, I'm looking forward to Saturday. Saturday is going to be a powerful event. So people hear about this, make sure you come to our event. Also, it's a pleasure to be a part of this conversation with Paul, with Dr. Browder, with yourself. And I hope that people watching this got a lot out of it and take the opportunity to study Kemetic history. This is some of the most important chapters of Black history. These are some of the formative chapters of Black history.
Thank you very much. And the floor is yours, Anthony.
Well, I want to thank you for creating this opportunity for all of your viewers, wherever they are in the world, to see four Black men in conversation together. We're not talking about sports. We're not talking about women. We're talking about things that really matter to us. Those who will be in London on Saturday will have an opportunity to see us in action. And what you are witnessing is the rebuilding of a new consciousness that will represent a shift in time and space. And I'm honored to be a part of this shift with you, brothers, and we're going to keep it moving forward.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much, Anthony, Tony Browder, Robin Walker, and Paul Obinna. I've been Brother Jeorge. We are the Black Secret, and we have been in conversation with Anthony Browder. Take care, everyone. Hotep. Absolutely. Yeah, we're done. We're done. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, I look forward to meeting you on Saturday. I'm going to be floating about. Danny couldn't be here. He's going to be leading the tour at the British Museum, but he sends his regards as well. So yeah, looking forward to the weekend. It's going to be powerful.
Well, here in the West, in Chicago, we call it a strong end. It's going to be a strong end this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. All right.
Yeah. Okay. I'll remember that. Fantastic.
All right. All right, brothers. I'll see you all soon. Thank you so much.
Looking forward to seeing you on Saturday. Have a good one.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Have a good one, Paul.
Take care.
See you.
Bye.